Hi, my name is Ahmet Aksoy. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Central Missouri. I will be presenting our work that I conducted with a student of mine, Sachin Rana. Our paper is titled Automated Fast-flux Detection Using Machine Learning and Genetic Algorithms. So first of all, in a cyber attack, attackers typically aim to cover their trail. And Fast-flux is one of those mechanisms that are used by malicious bots in order to basically hide the command and control servers. And these bots are infected by malware, and a network of these bots are typically controlled remotely by a bot master. And what happens is they apply rapid changes to the hosts, to the IP addresses of the hosts in order to prevent them from being discovered. So this basically helps make this network more resistant to discovery. And it's quite essential that we detect such networks because they may be used, for example, to send some spam or phishing emails which might contain links to some malicious servers. So in this paper, we present an automated fast-flux detection approach. We use machine learning and genetic algorithms in order to basically automate this process without expert input. And our approach can identify fast-flux hosts using a single packet originated from an infected machine with high accuracy. So again, as I mentioned, with the help of the machine learning and genetic algorithms, our approach can automatically identify the packet header fields in a TCP/IP stack without any expert input. We completely extract all of that distinguishing information from the data set provided. So some of the advantages of our approach is, for example, when it comes to feature selection, our approach is able to perform this in a reasonable amount of time due to using genetic algorithms. Because if you have 30 features, packet header fields in your data set, you're going to typically have more than that. And if you wanted to consider every possible combination of them in order to find the optimal set of features that give you the highest classification accuracy, then you would need to consider 2 to the power of 30, which is around 1 billion combinations to consider, which would take quite a lot of time to complete. Genetic algorithm, however, gives us the ability to be able to perform a search in this huge space in a reasonable amount of time with as optimal solution as possible. There is no hand selection of any useful features like the DNS TTL, which is known to be helpful for performing fast-flux detection. Our approach completely relies on the data set in determining which features are helpful for performing fast-flux detection. And we do not depend on any signatures from any other tools. Our tool completely generates its signatures for malicious versus benign packets on its own. And our approach is insusceptible to malicious hosts' behavior. Again, typically, attackers are going to try to change the behavior of their system, of their tools, in order to evade detection. And we can, by retraining on the new data set that would include those changes in the behavior, we would be able to automatically detect the new behavior through the use of our approach. No preset number of features used. As I said, we completely rely on the data. We try to reduce the number of features selected as much as possible. And while trying to keep the classification accuracy as high as possible. So depending on the data, our tool is automatically going to determine how many and which specific features it's going to need to use to obtain as high classification accuracy as possible. And to the best of our knowledge, our work is the first to employ a genetic algorithm in order to automatically detect the distinguishing features between malicious and benign hosts to be able to detect fast-flux without any expert input. The main disadvantage of our approach, however, is that our approach completely relies on the data set provided. So the data set provided needs to be as representative of the behaviors of malicious and benign hosts as possible. So as for the methodology, we consider the TCP/IP header for DNS packets specifically because Fast-flux sits on top of the DNS protocol. And we know that the DNS protocol also includes lower level protocols such as UDP and IP. So we also considered the features for UDP and IP protocols in order to observe if they made any contribution to the classification. We tested various machine learning algorithms, I believe 11 of them, which includes support vector machines, decision trees, and also artificial neural network algorithms as well. We analyzed each of these algorithms' classification accuracy, and we analyzed the one that generated the highest accuracy in each case throughout our research. So we used the ISOT, botnet, and the CTU13 datasets for the malicious packets, and we used the ISOT HTTP dataset for the benign packets. And we filtered data sets for only DNS response packets because we want to analyze the DNS behaviors of the hosts. So therefore, we only considered the DNS response packets. Of course, there are several features in the TCP/IP stack which would introduce bias to our results, such as the IP addresses, the IP identifiers, checksum, which also include information such as IP address, and timing features. If we were to include these, GA would have automatically selected them because they are going to be different for every host in the data set. But since we did not want that bias in our results, we made sure that we removed such entries from the data set. So as for how the feature selection works in our GA implementation, so in GA, chromosomes basically represent the solutions, and a chromosome contains a series of zeros and ones. In our implementation of GA, similarly, a solution is a series of zeros and ones, which is at the same length as the number of features in the data set. So if we had 30 features in the data set, then we would have 30 bits in our GA solution in chromosome. And if the corresponding bit of a feature in the GA solution is 0, that means, well, ignore this feature in classification when classifying using machine learning. If it's 1, then basically consider that feature in the classification accuracy. So GA, of course, runs the fitness function every time it comes across with a possible solution in order to determine its potential contribution to the classification, to the solution in long run. So the fitness function that we employed has 2 terms. The most important term is, of course, the accuracy, meaning if we select these specific features, what is the classification accuracy on our data set for classifying malicious versus benign packets? We also included another term because we wanted to reduce the number of features selected as much as possible so that it would be easier to analyze the actual useful features, and also in order to increase the classification efficiency. So we used the IP, UDP, and DNS features respectively, and we basically analyzed their contribution for fast-flux detection. Finally, we also merged all of these features together and ran our tests again to see what the accuracy would be like, which of the features would be selected across all these protocols for fast-flux detection. So using the IP features only, we observed that IP flags, IP TTL, time to live, and IP length were the features that were selected by GA. However, this does not necessarily indicate that the IP protocol alone is useful for performing fast-flux detection, because in my previous research on operating system fingerprinting, IoT device fingerprinting, I observed that these features are helpful for telling different operating systems apart and telling different IoT devices apart as well. So these features do not necessarily have to be dependent on the hosts that are malicious and benign, but it could be made due to mainly on the different types of hardware that each of these hosts are running on. Using the UDP features only, we observed 99% classification accuracy using the UDP length feature alone, just a single feature itself. So this is mainly because the UDP length is going to include the DNS packets length as well. However, this is not still very reliable because yes, the UDP length is going to include the DNS packet length, and yes, the DNS packet length is going to give us a little bit of information as to how long the packets for malicious and benign hosts are. And if one or the other has more information in them, which is typically the case, then just based on the length of the packets, we can have an estimated idea of whether this packet is coming from a malicious or benign host. But of course, this is not very reliable piece of information. So next, we switch to the DNS features, the features that we actually think are going to make the most contribution in performing fast-flux detection. We observed 100% classification accuracy using the DNS features alone. We observed that the GA selected at most 5 features for a single host at a time. And when we ran this for all the hosts, we observed the occurrence of at maximum 8 DNS features across all of them. So we observed that these features selected by GA were highly consistent with previously conducted research on fast flux detection. So GA was able to capture features that are known to contribute to the classification of fast flux. So one of them is the number of authoritative name servers returned in the DNS response packet. We observed several research papers which also use this particular feature. The number of additional records, the number of records returned in the DNS response is also a feature that is considered by several papers. The length of the response packet, this again has to deal with what I just mentioned on the UDP side. The length is going to vary between malicious and benign hosts, but this feature itself is not necessarily going to be the most reliable piece of information for fast flux detection. The DNS query response type, basically what kind of queries are being made? Is it a record A, record quadruple A? So these also, the frequency of these also turns out to pay attention to contribute to the classification of malicious and benign hosts. And the DNS query name length, so the number of words in query name length separated by dots, by periods, also turns out to contribute to the detection of malicious hosts. And we found several papers which also use this particular feature. And finally, of course, the DNS response time to live, which is very well known to contribute to the classification of fast flux infected hosts, because those hosts are going to constantly change their IP addresses, so therefore are not going to have very long TTL values. Finally, we merged all of these features together, IP, UDP, and DNS, and we were able to classify the packets for both of the data sets at a minimum of 99.9% accuracy. Of course, different algorithms yielded different classification accuracy. And the features selected when all of them were merged together were still very consistent with our findings from when we used the DNS features alone. So we observed that GA still prioritized the DNS features because, as they should be, those are the ones that contributed most into distinguishing malicious and benign hosts. So in conclusion, we presented a completely automated single packet fast flux detection using machine learning and genetic algorithms. And our approach automatically selects a subset of features that contribute most to the classification of benign and malicious hosts. And feature selection also helps eliminate features that may cause noise. So we observed that in some cases, when we ran all the features together, we obtained less accuracy than when we selected the most contributing features. So that's another benefit of using GA in our implementation. And our approach achieved more than 99% classification accuracy using less than half of the features in the DNS packet headers. GA also selected, GA selected features with no expert input were highly consistent with the features with the packet headers that we already know are helpful for identifying fast-flux infected hosts. So we observed that consistency in our results as well. And also, if malicious systems behavior changes in order to evade detection, by retraining our tool, by using our approach to retrain the data set, the updated data set, we are expected to capture that new behavior, which is a very important, in my opinion, contribution of our paper. So in the future, we would like to consider the statistical values to each feature in the data set. For this work, we only took the values as they were in the packets, but maybe things such as the minimum or the maximum number of IPs in the DNS response packet, and also maybe the average time to live would make more contribution into increasing the insusceptibility of our approach to any possible changes in the behavior of malicious hosts. So that is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.